podcast where we geek out about board games, the mechanisms behind them, and the people who create them. Speaking of, I'm your host, Candice Harris, and I'm here with Cole Wehrle from Whirligig Games and Leader Games, and you might know him as the designer of several games such as Root, Pax Pamir, John Company, Oath, and more. How are you doing today, Cole?
I'm doing so well, Candice. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here today. It was also great to hang with you at Pax Unplugged a few weeks ago.
Yeah, it seems so long ago, but my gosh, it was just there.
It does seem like it was forever ago. And you guys, you were running demos of arcs there, right?
Yeah, we had a set of arcs in first look, and I thought I was going to be able to show it to people and to even like play some games with staff, but the table was just thankfully packed. And so I went and just made sure people were playing by the rules and having a good time. But it was lovely seeing people pushing around those.
Yeah,
those pieces.
that's awesome. I did not get a chance to try it out, but I still have not tried it out even on like TTS or anything, but I'm really excited to try it. Like, how is like development coming along?
It's good. In some respects, the game's done in the sense that the core chassis has proved like very strong. We have not made any kind of like major dev change for months now. And so the work of the phase they're in right now is just building out all the campaign stuff and making sure that the game is like big enough to hold the campaign, which it seems to be just fine. And then we have to make this choice about how are we going to present the campaign. So there are all these very small choices about, do we have booklets or stickers or tuck boxes? Gotcha. What if we want players to be able to play it quickly? How are they going to do that? Those questions take months to resolve, and that's kind of like where we're at with it. But I'm having a lot of fun.
That is awesome. Well, today we're going to discuss our top 5 board game hidden gems. Nowadays there are so many games out, and there are more and more coming each year. And it's exciting to kind of experience this growth in our hobby, especially like I'm still sort of newer in the hobby. But I get excited every year. There are all these like different games coming out, but it often leads to lots of great games kind of being missed by a lot of people. And Cole, every time I see you at a convention, you always tell me about these interesting sounding games that I've never heard of. You also have a super unique style when it comes to game design. So I'm very curious to hear what some of your favorite hidden gems are.
Oh yeah, this is my favorite subject because I'm always kind of trawling and looking for kind of odd games. One of my favorite shows to go to, which I haven't been to for a couple of years, is Board Game Geek.
Yeah.
And the tradition that I have at BGG is I try not to schedule anything. And instead, every day we go to the library. Everyone gets a game and we sit there and learn. And we want to find strange things and games that we would never have access to. And I just love that experience of like stumbling through a big game library and playing things I've never heard
That is awesome. Yeah, I remember you telling me that. And I'm looking forward to like whenever you can get back to BGG Con so I could jump in on one of those oddball games. I mean, you did show me I'm the Boss at at PAX Unplugged, which was just a riot, and I ended up buying a copy on the BGG market. So I have
awesome.
So I have it, and I'm looking forward to kind of just like breaking that out on a fun, like silly game night especially when I have 6 players. Like it was really cool doing that with 6.
Yeah, for sure.
But before we start discussing our favorite board game hidden gems, I'd love to hear what you've been playing lately, Cole. So let's jump into fresh plays.
So I have been kind of re-exploring wargaming lately. I had a chance to go to Historicon in San Diego, and which is a show that Drew and I, my brother and I, had really loved going to because it's just great to be around folks who work in historical game design. I mean, it's a funny thing, right? Because a lot of the people in that area, they just design so differently than people who work in like the mainstream part of the hobby. And I just love spending time with wargame designers. They just have a different way of approaching problems, and it was lovely to be reminded of how much I enjoy historical games. And so because of that, I've been playing all these war games. I mean, from hex encounter games, all kinds of stuff lately.
Awesome.
And just really enjoying it. And so I wanted one of the games I've been playing a lot lately is Almoravid. by Voko Runke, who's the person who designed the Coin series and also this Levian campaign series. And it was published by GMT Games. It came out this year, so it's a fresh fresh game, and it is so wonderful. It's a heavy game where you basically the game covers a period of Spanish history where you have the Taifa kingdoms, which were these small Muslim kingdoms in southern Spain, and the Reconquista, which is when the Christian kings of the north kind of went down and tried to take over different parts of Spain. And it is one of the most beautiful war games I've played in a long time. Both its presentation is amazing because it's deeply researched and has a wonderful like aesthetic presentation with wooden pieces and things. And then the actual design of the game is so interesting because what you're dealing with, I think it makes sense to start by saying something about the system, the Levian campaign system. The other one of these games is called Nevsky, and there are many more planned, but they are about warfare in the Middle Ages. And, we have a lot of fantasy war games. I've worked on those before. But we don't often pay a lot of attention to like how wars were actually fought at that time. And one of the most important things is to know that when you raised a group of troops, they weren't going to stay with you for very long. And while you had them, you had to worry about feeding them and moving them around and making sure that they were happy. And so you were always fighting these wars with an eye towards where are we going to get the food? Are we going to be able to finish prosecuting the siege before my people get sad and just go home? And so it's such an interesting way of approaching the subject. It's deeply researched, as I said. And then the actual scenario, the kind of core scenario of Almoravid is the two players it's almost like there's almost kind of a gambit system because the way it works is the Muslim player has to, if they want to raise reinforcements, they activate kind of parts of the map. And so if they want a bigger army, they're giving more prizes to the Christian player to contest. And so you're always having to choose like, how wide of a war do we want this to be? Do we want it to be a small war or a big war? And you're also having, if your guys are starting to get beat and run away, you have to say, well, I'd rather you like go on the bench for a few seasons and then you'll come back next spring and we'll have a good time. So it's almost like hockey or something where you're having to like decide like, actually I'm going to put you back and then send out another, like a fresher lord to fight for a bit.
Yeah.
And it just has a wonderful ebb and flow. And the last thing I'll say I could talk about it all day is, it's a 2-player game fundamentally, but the core design is so interesting that you can very enjoyably play it as a solo game where you just kind of like play both sides. And also it's so interesting that it's lovely as a team game where like kind of, no matter how many people are sitting at the table, say like, yeah, we're playing Almoravid, like, why don't you just take a seat and you can like be in charge of this part and we'll kind of plan together and work together. And it's just, there's just a lot to like talk about that. And I love sort of staff war games. And for anyone who is intimidated by the rules, the only thing I'll say is there are some really wonderful teaching videos, including this amazing video by someone named Jean-Michel Grosjean, who has these YouTube teaching videos. And he's a lovely French accent and he goes through Almoravid as if you were taking a college seminar. So it's like not like a very terse 20-minute teach. It's like awesome. A 2-hour PowerPoint presentation where he goes through every rule several times. He like very carefully, like make sure you understand the core concepts. And if you treat it like you're getting ready to study for like a class or something, I think it's a lot of fun.
Did he also do one for Nevsky?
Yeah, he does.
Okay, yeah, I've watched his Nevsky videos. They are amazing. So that is really awesome. Now you've got me super hyped to like break out my copy of Almoravid. I have been wanting to play it, but I've also like, I want to play Nevsky more because I've only just barely dabbled in Nevsky. And I completely agree with you that it's like really fascinating to kind of approach a war game from more of the logistical aspects of war. So I don't know. I think it's a really like brilliant series that's kind of being in development. And I've kind of peeked at some of the other games that are coming down the pike in the Levian campaign series. I just haven't had enough time to like fully delve
it's
into
a big
it.
meal.
Yeah.
I mean, the background source book is like 60 pages long. And that's just essays and like notes about how the game works.
So
and
cool.
so, but if you want a big meal, it's a good one.
Cool. That is Almoravid from GMT Games and Volko Rumke. Awesome. Well, so at PAX, I surprisingly got into a game called SolForge Fusion, which it's a 2-player hybrid deck game that has lane-based combat. And it came out in 2022, so this year, and it's designed by this small designer you might have heard of called Richard Garfield, the creator of Magic the Gathering, and also Justin Gary, who created the deck building game Ascension, and it's published by Justin Gary's company Stoneblade Entertainment. So I actually had a meeting with Justin at PAX, and I ended up just sitting down to play a demo game of SolForge Fusion. Ended up buying some card packs and then completely got hooked on it and was like playing it every day with my nephew because I ended up staying in Philly for for a week and a half after PAX because we have family there, so kind of turned that into a family trip. But anyway, in SolForge Fusion, which is actually based off of a digital card game that was out maybe in 2015 or something. But it ended up kind of fizzling out I forget the exact reason, but then they kind of re-implemented as SolForge Fusion. And you have 4 different factions. I'll just go by colors: red, purple, green, and blue. And each faction has its own specialty. Like red is a little more aggressive. Green has a lot of healing cards. So you buy these different booster decks, and each deck is completely unique because it's algorithmically generated, like something like Keyforge, which I've never played, so I can't, compare it, but I don't think the gameplay is similar at all.
But these are every card is designed by the algorithm, as opposed to Keyforge, where the cards are handmade, but then the decks are algorithmic.
Oh, no. These, you might get common cards in decks, but just the full deck itself is unique. I
see.
So you will see repeats of cards here and there, but it's a head-to-head dueling game, and your goal is to reduce your opponent's health to 0 first before they do it to you. You start with 50 health, and you alternate, being on offense while your opponent's on defense, and then you switch it up. And basically, you're playing either a creature card or a spell card, or you're activating a spell card. And when you play creature cards, you're playing them into one of 5 lanes, and you're basically going to be attacking your opponent with that creature. If you're on offense, you're putting the card in the front of the lane, but if you're on defense, it's kind of being tucked in the back. And then after you take 2 actions each, just alternating, and you're usually playing just 2 cards, then you're going to resolve combat for any lanes that have a creature in the front slot, like on the offense slot. But the cool thing is, every time you play a card, you are putting an upgraded version of that card into your discard pile. So instead of a deck building game where you're buying cards and you're kind of making your deck more powerful that way, you are choosing out of this hand of 5 cards which 2 you're going to play each round, and you're automatically just going to be upgrading them. And then after you play through 3 hands where you're doing 2 actions each, you reshuffle your deck. So now your deck has, some level 2 cards and some of your level 1 cards. And there are also 5 cards I didn't mention, but it's a 20 card deck that you're working with. So there are 5 cards you're not going to see that first hand. And every time you shuffle your deck, it's called a deck cycle. So your deck is kind of getting more and more powerful. And as you cycle through your deck, you're also getting a special ability on this unique Forgeborn character you have. So you're unlocking this special ability, which is really cool. And you're just playing these cards. You have spell cards also that you can play to trigger things. And they have all sorts of effects. Some of the creatures have mobility where they can shift lanes after they're initially placed. But it's such a cool game. I think the simplicity of it, the fact that you don't need to gather resources. You're just picking a card and playing it. And it's so satisfying to then shuffle your deck and now have upgraded versions of all the cards. And it actually makes it like surprisingly challenging to decide each round, like like you might want to upgrade a certain card because you're like, I want to have that in my next deck cycle at the next level. But you're like, I'm like, oh, well, Cole played that. And now I really need to defend against that with this card instead. So you're having these constant, like, awesome hand management struggles.
Cool.
And then, like, if you, let's say you're on deck cycle 2 and now you're starting to see some of those level 2 cards. Well, if you play those, now you're putting the level 3 card in your discard pile for your next deck cycle. But guess what? The cards only go to level 3. So when you actually play that level 3 card, now you're thinning your deck because you don't have that card anymore. So
cool.
like so you can like kind of pace the game where it's like, oh, maybe I'm gonna just try to like level up my level 1s to level 2, or maybe I just want to push hard and try to get some of these cards to level 3 and just like hit Cole hard.
yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. So it's really cool. And then I like, I've already kind of invested in several decks, and I'm having fun just mixing and matching. Like, oh, I'm gonna take this random purple deck and take this random red deck, and let's go. And and I didn't really explain it, but you take, like, to start the game, you take level 1 cards from both decks. So I would have my 10 red level 1 cards and my 10 purple level 1 cards, and I shuffle them together, and that's my starting hand. And then between each deck has a Forgeborn, which is kind of like a special leader. So you pick one of those at the beginning of the game to play as. And again, that's going to give you special abilities. So this is SolForge Fusion. It just came out in 2022. I'm a bit addicted to it.
Cool.
And I think it's cool. Have you ever heard of it or tried it?
No, I haven't. I need to check it though. I'm going to put a little footnote on yours, which is a hidden gem that I did not put on my hidden gem list.
Nice.
David Sirlin's Codex. Which I think is a really cool game that has a like similar like deck building element where we're playing like a dueling game, but then we're secretly deck building into it, and there's a fun card upgrade that is kind of similar. So it's interesting.
Oh, neat! I've never tried it. I feel like I've heard of it. Like I could picture the box cover, but Codex. Okay,
it's good. It just like didn't quite land for a lot of reasons, but it's still a good game, and it's pretty easy to find.
Okay, I like that honorable mention. Just
it's an honorable mention.
Slid it right in there. Cool. What else have you been playing, Cole?
So I have started Frosthaven like everyone else in the world. Which is like, so I have a weird relationship to Gloomhaven. I love Isaac, and I really admire the care that he puts into his games. But there's always a but. He doesn't really like design for me. It's like a funny thing where it's like he works in a different area than I do. I like him. We've done, I was on a panel with him a long time ago, and I always make sure to say hi. We've had some great games together at BGG Con.
Nice.
But he like just works in a different genre. And like Gloomhaven was, where I played it back when it came out, like very first run of Gloomhaven. And we never got that far. We got about 15 scenarios in, but we had too small of an apartment. And so like we really only had one table. And we had 2 small kids, and there was like, we're going to set it up, we're going to play, and then I got to pack it away. And so I thought like, I kind of want to revisit this at some point. And so when the digital version came out, I played it a bunch and was like, okay, I really like this, because Gloomhaven, and I think the best take I have seen about Gloomhaven, and Frosthaven for that matter, is from the Shut Up and Sit Down podcast, which described it as like, it's fundamentally a video game. And Frosthaven is the sequel to a video game, in the sense that there's like kind of 30% more of everything, which I thought was a really lovely way, just a lovely way of describing it. But I decided, I'm working on a campaign game right now. I love campaign games. And so I wanted to see like, take me to the cutting edge of campaign games. So I picked up a copy, and it was funny. I was building the game and punching it and like building an insert. Took, 2 days or whatever to get it all set up. And at various points in that time, I was extremely excited. And at other points, if somebody would have walked up to me and said, "Here's $50, I'll take everything," I'll say yes. Because it's so much. It's so much. And then I packed everything carefully back up in the box and was like, oh, packing and unpacking this game is going to kill it for me. It takes too much time. So I decided, because now we have like a little game nook, and like a little corner of our basement is like 4 games. I was like, you know what? This is a very like suburban game. And I have a house that's now like large enough to play it. So what if I encounter Frosthaven exactly on the ground it wants me to encounter? This is like, I have this philosophy with like music. Like when I listen to an album, I'm like, I'm not persnickety. Like if I listen to like free jazz or something, I'm like, I want to encounter this in the most favorable ground for the musicians who put it together, right?
Yeah.
And even if I find it's not to my taste, it's like, well, at least I encountered it the way they wanted me to encounter it, right? So I don't listen to ambient music and then I get mad because it's ambient music or something, right? And so I said, okay, I went down to my little game nook and I cleared a shelf, put those games in the attic, and just put Frosthaven on the shelf, unboxed, as if it were like a Warhammer army. And I said, like, this is the Frosthaven shelf, and I can very quickly set up scenarios.
Yeah.
And we're just gonna go through it. And so I'm a few scenarios in.
Cool.
And it's very good. I mean, it is consistently like really smart, and it's super, super ambitious. Just I have so much respect for Isaac and his team, because I know that like it's hard to make anything and it's really hard to build big things. And so when I was like looking at the design and dev credits, and he's like, okay, this person was like specializing on monsters and this person worked on like the potion system. And I was like, that's incredible. Yeah. Just like, it's a real feat. Yeah. And I like a lot of the individual things, but I'm curious how deep I'm going to have to get into the game before I can really talk about it. Because I'll say like right now it's good, but it's just pretty much like Gloomhaven with a few little bells and whistles.
Okay.
But who knows what's going to happen over the next like 50 scenarios or whatever, right?
Yep.
It is. I mean, it's just, it's a massive work. And I think, you know, I'll say what everyone else has said about it, which is if you loved Gloomhaven, you're going to love this. And if you didn't like Gloomhaven, nothing about this is going to make you like it. Because it's just, it's so much, it almost feels like a love letter to the fans of Gloomhaven. That's my favorite genre of like artistic creation. Like someone said, like, look, I went out and built exactly the thing I wanted.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of fun to just sort of like readjust my own design sensibilities to like put myself on Isaac's wavelength and then just experience it.
That's cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I have not received my copy yet, but I backed it, and crazy story, I've actually never played Gloomhaven, the big one. I played Jaws of the Lion a little bit. I played, maybe like 5 or 6 scenarios, but it was also a point where I was playing a lot of like Too Many Bones, and I was like, there's some similarities there. Obviously, like the card play is very different, and you're level, but it's cooperative, But
like, how could you own both? It's like a good, like you run into that problem a little bit, right?
Yeah, so I ended up getting rid of my big Gloomhaven, and I still have Jaws of the Lion, but I was like, I want to get Frosthaven, and so I'm excited to explore it. I have a couple friends locally that want to start a campaign, so that is going to probably kick off soon. But yeah,
well, and it's also, the last thing I'll say, it's fun to be playing something that everyone else is playing. A little bit too.
Yeah.
And I had like the other campaign game I'm very excited about is Undaunted Stalingrad, which I have a copy of. Yes. But I was like, I know this is excellent. Like I look through it, I'm like, this is going to be incredible. Yeah. And whatever year I play it in, it will be game of the year or whatever. Like I'm like, I completely, I'm already sold. Whereas Frosthaven is like, ooh, here's something I don't really understand or know. I'm like, I'm not sure what I think of Frosthaven, which is exciting.
Yeah. I totally get that. Oh yeah, and I was gonna also, I meant to comment on your Almoravid and going to like SD HistCon. I still have such like FOMO from not being able to go because it conflicted with BGG-Con this year, but I hope next year it won't, because I would really love to go. Like I always enjoy my time at the GMT's warehouse weekend, and with a lot of that crew shows up there, and so anyway, I hope to make it there next year, because I know it's an amazing time, and I love San Diego also.
Yeah. All wins. All right, what about you? What's your other game?
So another game that I've been playing recently is actually kind of a spin-off from SolForge Fusion. So basically, when I was all excited about SolForge Fusion, I told Aldi, I was like, hey, I'm getting into this game, SolForge Fusion. And we were talking about, because he used to actually play the original SolForge, but he was like, oh, have you tried Flesh and Blood? And I was like, no, I don't even know what that is. So I kind of looked it up, and I was like, oh, cool. But anyway, I was watching then, put that in the back burner of my brain. But then I was watching a lot of Team Covenant videos for SolForge Fusion because, they are one channel that I've watched a lot in terms of like learning LCGs and, hearing their thoughts on it. Because they're just playing like CCGs, TCGs, LCGs, all. And for people who don't know what I'm saying, a TCG is trading card game, CCG is collectible card game, and then LCG is living card game. But Team Covenant does a great job of like covering a bunch of games. Like when I got into Netrunner, the Lord of the Rings LCG, yada, yada, yada. They have a great channel. And so I was just absorbing content from them on SolForge Fusion, getting myself even more excited about it. And every once in a while they would bring up Fab. They would say Fab. And I'm like, and then at some point it just kind of, the wires crossed where I was like, Aldi asked about Flesh and Blood. They're talking about Fab. So then I just started watching some videos on Flesh and Blood. And now my SolForge Fusion addiction kind of pushed forward into more of a Flesh and Blood addiction. And Flesh and Blood is a TCG which was released in 2019. It's designed by James White, and Chris Gehring and Jason Chung are the developers on it. And it's published by Legend Story Studios, which is a publishing company in New Zealand that is on a mission to kind of change the global trading card game industry. And I am not very well versed in that industry at all. So, but anybody who's on a mission to try to improve things is like, cool. Mm-hmm. But this is mainly also like a 1-versus-1 kind of game. But you can also, they have different formats. There's one where you can play, a multiplayer version of the game. And there are different, you're playing as a hero. And I'm competing against another person who's playing as a different hero. And one of the cool things about the game is there are all these different types of heroes. You have warriors, ninjas, wizards, rune blades. Then you have elemental rune blades, elemental wizards, light warriors, all these different types of heroes. And they all play so differently. And the flavor just feels, I don't know, they just did such a great job with the art. And, it's a game where, it's a fantasy theme. Sure. But when you're playing, you are the perspective of the hero, kind of. So it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm summoning armies and summoning minions to do this and that. It's like, no, we are like fighting each other. So you have, at the start of the game, you get your deck of cards. I've been playing mostly the Blitz format. So that'll be a 40 card deck of cards. And then you start with a hero card that has a special ability. You have 20 health in the Blitz format. And then you also have equipment. So you'll have a piece of headgear, something on your chest you can add, something on your arms, something on your legs. And these are all cards that you can like use to help as you're fighting against this other hero. And then you also have a weapon. And sometimes it depends, like they'll tell you if you need 2 hands or 1 hand, because if you have a 1-hand weapon, you could have 2 of them. But if you have a 2-hand weapon, you just have 1 weapon. And then you have this deck of cards, and you'll draw cards to your intellect value, which I think every hero that exists for this game currently, the intellect is 4. So you're going to have a 4-card hand of cards that are they're action cards for the most part. A lot of them are attack cards, but then you also have some non-attack cards. And each turn you have 2 phases. You have an action phase and then an end of turn phase. And if it is my turn, again, there's another like offense thing. If I'm on offense, I get exactly 1 action point where I can, trigger an attack in most cases. And there are certain cards you'll come across that have an effect called Go Again. That means that after I resolve 1 card, now I get another action point. So you can do a lot of, if you're crafty, a lot of chaining things. But when you play a card, it has a resource cost of 0 to 3. And to pay a resource, you have to pitch a card from your hand. So each card is a multi-use card. And in the top left corner, it'll have 3 pips or 1 to 3 pips. So basically, when you pitch the card, it's either going to give you 1 resource, 2 resources, or 3 resources, depending on the card. And then on the right side of the card is the cost to play it, the top right. And the bottom right is if you use the card for defense, what your defense value is. And then the bottom left, if it's an attack card, it's going to have an attack value. So when you're looking at your hand of cards to attack, you're trying to, almost in the sense of like poker, right? You get this hand of cards and you're trying to like make the best combination you can with it against your competition. Now, what happens is if I attack you, Cole, you then have your hand of 4 cards and you can decide if you want to defend. And if you play a card, you do not draw back until your action phase.
Cool. Sure.
So you can see already where it's like you are weighing, is it worth me taking all this damage from Candice, so I can preserve these 4 cards and then do something even crazier back? Because
Fun.
It's like you need the cards to pay for cards. Yeah, it's so good. It's like you need the cards to pay for cards to play. The other thing is the cards you use for fighting. So if you did like play a couple cards to defend, you don't have to pay anything for them. But every card that you use in the fight, whether you're the attacker or defender, goes to your graveyard. And you generally are not seeing those cards again unless you have some effect that says get something from your graveyard. But the cards you pitch to spend as resources go to the bottom of your deck at the end of the turn. So you'll see those again probably. And in this game, I've only played the Blitz format with a 40-card deck, but I've had multiple games where we go to the end of the deck and it's like you don't reshuffle. So card management is also kind of important. And then at the end of your turn, so again, you could play, if you have go again effects, you could play another attack. And but at the end of your turn, you can place 1 card in your arsenal, which is like a secret slot below your hero card, face down, if you don't already have a card in your arsenal. And then that becomes, on your next turn, like a 5th card that you can use. So it has, I haven't gone into like every little detail, but I'm just like really fascinated with it. I've played, probably like 3 different types of heroes so far. And it's the kind of game where I'm like, I play it and I'm like, oh, now I see the potential of what this type of hero can do. I need to play this again. But I'm also so curious to like try all these other heroes because they're so, like the play styles are so different. Like the ninjas,
it just seems like the core format is so clean and so different from other CGs. I mean, even when you play like the non-Magic the Gathering games, that game has such gravity that all the other ones are like, well, it's kind of like Magic.
Right.
And this is like very different.
It is very different. And I'm telling you, like the hand management decisions you have. And then plus, again, you also have this equipment you're wearing. So it's like, when does it make sense for me to like defend with my leg gear? Because usually if I defend with my leg gear, I've destroyed it. So you start strong, like in real life, if you were battling somebody, and as you play, you're getting weaker and weaker because you're damaging your equipment to kind of help you, and you're also, losing cards, which are resources. So anyway, this is my recent
that's interesting.
addiction, and it's just crazy because I guess I do love hand management. Like that is probably one of my favorite mechanisms. That's why I love CDGs and everything, card-driven games. But there's something that I'm just really fascinated by this game, and I'm just kind of wanting to play it every day.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, and that is Flesh and Blood. You should give it a try sometime. Yeah,
well, there are people in my group who've been playing it, and but in the same way that they're like, oh yeah, fab or whatever, and I'm like, okay, it's the CG of the moment, and I don't really think about it. But now you've described it, I'm like, oh no, do I need to go find a couple decks?
Yes, do it. Cool. Well, let's talk about our favorite hidden gem board games. Shall we?
Let's get into it.
All right, Cole, I'm going to let you kick it off here. And what's your number 5?
Okay, so the first one I'm going to say before we get into it that I tried to balance like stuff that was really hard to find with stuff that was easy to find. Like the general rule is everything I'm going to mention, you can find a copy. It might be on eBay, But like, I'm not trotting out like Divine Right or something that like is going to be a Grail game that's going to take you years to find. Like, this is all stuff that they printed a lot of at some point.
Yeah.
So even the games that are a little bit older, like, be patient, use the BGG marketplace. You will find a copy for a reasonable price. The first one is the game Serenissima by Dominique Erhard, I guess. And this is a game, I have a very long personal relationship with this game. Back in like 2003 or 2004, I'm a little high schooler, and there was a new game store that opened up in my hometown that wasn't around for very long. But it was a game store that existed in that spot, like kind of, they would like sell Puerto Rico, Princess of Florence, I think I bought there. But then like, it was like right before like the games really took steam, and like, you would see Catan on TV shows and things like that. And I remember walking in and saying like, I was the very first time I was at the store, it was my birthday. I could buy one game of anything. And they were like, what do you like? And I'm like, I like trading games, I like fighting games. At that point I had played Catan and things like that. And the person who owned the store, this kind of jolly guy, he said, you should check out this game, Serenissima. And Serenissima is an amazing design. There are 2 editions and they are both good. They're quite different, but both are good. And the core mechanism of Serenissima is very simple. You are playing these Venetian trading families, and your goal is to amass a big trade empire. But the core mechanism of the game is you have these boats, and your boats have 5 slots, and you visit different cities. And when you buy goods from those cities, you put them on your boat, and then you take them to cities that don't yet have that good color. Okay, pretty simple stuff. But the key thing is your 5-slot boats, they move as far as the number of sailors you have on the boat. So if you have 4 sailors, your boat moves 4 spots, but you now only have 1 cargo slot. And the whole game spins out from that very simple mechanism. But then also it's a very like trim, well-designed Euro. But then it also has you can park your boats up to next to the other players and just start fighting them and steal their goods. You can dump their goods into the ocean, and it feels like what if somebody had like, instead of making Catan what if it was more like Risk or something?
Wow.
Because the original game isn't from 2012; it's from quite a bit earlier. I think maybe closer to 2002 or something, and it is just a really clean, wonderful, goofy game that I just really love. And it's one of those that I will even be talking to like other designer friends and they have no idea what it is. And I'm like, Serenissima, it's incredible. In fact, there was a copy at PAX Unplugged, like in the used game, like little store that was there for like $30. And I'm like, this game is great.
My goodness.
And, more people should be hunting for it. I will say that I think the first edition has some hard edges, but it does have like some player scaling, like slight issues. The issues are worth it. Like, the game doesn't have to be 10 to be wonderful. And the second edition did fix some of those problems.
Wow.
So that's Serenissima, a great title.
I have never heard of that game, and it sounds super cool. So I might have to track down a copy of that. I can already see this list is going to get me in trouble.
Oh, no.
My number 5 is Dilluvia Project, which is a game from Alexandra Garcia, and it was published by Spielworks and Tasty Metro Games, and it was originally released in 2015. And the deal is Earth is overpopulated, but recent technological developments open new possibilities, whole cities hovering high in the skies. So we are entrepreneurs basically managing the construction of the first sky city. And the game is a combination of, tile drafting, worker placement, and city building. And it is so cool. So my friend Ben showed me this game months ago, and it's one of those games that I immediately went out and bought. You play over 7 rounds, and each round there's a market phase first, and then there's an action phase. In the market phase, you're doing tile drafting. In the action phase, you're doing worker placement. So during the tile drafting phase, there's a section of the board that you'll populate with these different tiles that are, resources or special abilities. And it's a 4x4 grid. And everybody has a Zeppelin ship token, So if I'm first player, I get first dibs. I pick a row or column, and I point my my Zeppelin at it. And then everybody's going to do that in turn order. And then back in turn order, after everyone's placed a Zeppelin, we start buying. And you can only buy from the row or column where your Zeppelin is. The tile that is closest to your Zeppelin costs 1 coin. Then the next one would cost 2. The next one would cost 3. Next one would cost 4. But by the time it gets around to, like, let's say the 4th player, there are going to be some tiles missing. Oh, the other thing is you can't put another player's Zeppelin can't be on the same exact row, like pointing at the other player. So everybody has to pick kind of a different row or column. But basically, as people start buying tiles, then when it's another player's turn, any empty rows in there or any empty tile spaces in their row, they get money back on. So you might be helping someone out by buying a tile where their Zeppelin is, because they're going to get some money. You're taking that tile from them and not giving them the opportunity to buy it, but they're getting some benefit from it. So there's this cool drafting part. And then the worker placement is really cool too, because you have like discs, and there's certain spaces where you can only play 1 worker per color. But other places you could put multiple workers, and then you also have these special workers, and every space has a bonus like action that only the first person who put a special worker in that space can actually do it. So a lot of what you're doing is you're buying plots of land. So the right half of the board is like a big kind of open grid where you can place cubes out into, buying plots of land to reserve where you could construct buildings in the future. You can also, there's like space to gain resources. There's a place where you can even buy leftover tiles from the tile market. Or you can spend money and start constructing buildings, assuming you have some land reserved. But when you're constructing a building, there's like a separate board that has all the buildings, and here are the costs for the different buildings. And certain buildings get revealed as the game progresses. And after you place a building, so you're putting it on, like, maybe I have a square here of 4 of my cubes, and I'm placing just a 4 square tile down. When you place a building, you get to decide what kind of income you want from it. So it could either be prestige income, or it could be like resources and or money, and everything is important. So the one main thing that's very unique about this game is that it has like a 2-part scoring system. So you are trying to get prestige, but you're also trying to build as many buildings as you can, because every time you build a building, you're increasing your marker on your personal building track. And when your prestige marker hits one of the numbers divisible by 10, so 10, 20, 30, 40, you're going to get to gain population based on where your track is that you've been building buildings on. So you're trying to like balance all these things. So every time your prestige marker hits or passes a 10 marker, a multiple of 10, it's just going to, like, you're going to get more and more population. And at the end of the game, the goal is to have the most population. But yeah, everything is so interesting about this game, and very, like, lots of player interaction on the tile draft, lots of player interaction with the worker placement, and also with like vying for areas on the city building area. And it has that, like, the 2-part scoring is just kind of like really brilliant to me, because you have to like really balance it. And I also like really love the art of this game. Although, like, some of the graphic design isn't the greatest. It's kind of like small and hard to read some things. But outside of that, it's a really cool game. Have you played it?
I have not. It has been on my Spielworks, because I love Spielworks games, and it's been on my list forever because I'm a sucker for airships, and like the Euro mechanism is cool. And I mean, to me, Spielworks is like a company of hidden gems, because they usually do those small print runs.
Totally.
And so like the games never quite get that wider appeal, but like I've been I just learned how to play the Throne of Allegoria or whatever, and I was like, oh, this game seems kind of awesome. And it's a little quiet. It like already sold.
Yeah, but yeah, I totally agree. Spielworks puts out some bangers. Yeah, so that is Dilluvia project. I also was kind of thinking about that too in terms of putting games on the list that are still available. But I think
you can still find copies
of it
around.
And I'm still grateful to my friend Ben for showing me that one, because that was something like before we even finished the game, I think I was ordering it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So what's your number 4?
Okay, so my number 4 is, it feels like a cheat because it's a game I've been recommending for years, but usually I feel like I recommend it to people in person, and I don't know if I've really talked about it online. But this is 1973's Conspiracy, designed by Eric Solomon, and then republished in 2019 with some changes done by the Restoration Games team.
Gotcha.
Including Justin and also Rob Davio, who has done some games. And this is another case where both versions of the game are very good. I slightly prefer the 1973 version, but only because it's easier to teach and it's a little simpler. But I actually think that a lot of the changes that were done in 2019 are very like smart, well considered, probably make the game a little bit better. But it's a case of like, I think that the original one is like a 9, or whatever. And maybe the new one is a little bit better, but it takes 3 times longer to teach. So you have to make that judgment. Neither one takes that long to teach. And if you've never played this game, just get the copy that's closest at hand.
Gotcha.
Right. And if you want the old version, it is so easy to get because it was published by Milton Bradley.
Oh,
so there's like, you can find copies on eBay for like $5. So Conspiracy, it's in probably like my low-key favorite genre of games, which is competitive deduction games. Not deduction games where we're like competing to like solve a riddle, like not like Matrix style deduction, but like actually I'm trying to like outfox you and trick you and you're trying to trick me, right? And so the way it works is you're playing a spy agency and you have your little spy headquarters. And in the middle of the map, and so you have a point-to-point movement map kind of spread across the board. And then in the middle of the map, there's a briefcase. And then on the edge of the map, there are all of these agents. And whenever an agent moves, they can take the briefcase with them. That's the core of the game. But the key thing about the game is that the agents don't belong to any players. So on your turn, you can either choose to move an agent, or you can make a secret bid. You get 1 stack of money at the beginning of the game, and you can be slowly spending it to put bids on the agents. And whenever you move an agent, you say, I'm going to move Mr. Green. He's going to Cairo, and he's going to take the briefcase with him. If somebody has more money on that agent than you, they can say like, well, I've got $5,000 on Mr. Green. And at that point, you can say like, okay, Mr. Green doesn't move. Or you'd say, you know what? I actually have $6,000 on him. And so, but you might actually have $6,000 on him, but choose not to reveal that, because you want that other player to think he's got a lock on Mr. Green. And then you can also play the agents to kill each other. So I could like spend $2,000 on like, I don't know, I'm using clue names, right? Colonel Mustard. I could spend $2,000 on Colonel Mustard to have him kill Agent Green. And no matter how much money, maybe everybody put $10,000 on that one character. It doesn't matter because he just got offed. And the game is a absolute scream. It is so interesting. And it does the map dynamic is, it does so much work. I want to use it. If I were to ever teach a game design class, I'd want to use it because it uses a very simple spatial mechanism where you're always pulling the briefcase kind of towards 2 players. So like if you're my left-hand partner in the game, there are times where you and I are working together, because every time the briefcase moves, southwest, let's say, it's like moving towards like both of our zones. And then later, if I need to move it towards me, maybe I'm now working with my right hand.
Gotcha.
Interesting. And so it feels like Spies. It feels like a good like John le Carré novel.
That's awesome.
And it's absolutely goofy, and I just highly recommend it if you like interesting secret auction games or interesting deduction games. It's one of the best.
Wow. Sounds cool. What's the name again?
It's called Conspiracy.
Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to think if I've heard of that.
Yeah, no, it's one that I got introduced to it many years ago. Actually, I think we found it. I can't remember how I was in. I can't remember if someone told me about it or if I it might have been like something that I found out about at BGG. It's like that type of game.
Cool. I got to check that one out too. Okay, well, my number 4 is Dual Powers Revolution 1917. It's designed by Brett Myers, and it's published by Thunderworks Games, which is the publishing company that makes Role Player. It was released and this is not like a typical game that they put out, but it was released in 2018. It's mainly a 2-player game, but it has a solo mode. And the story is, it's a historical game. It's 1917. Tsar Nicholas II was forced to abdicate the throne of Russia, and basically one player is taking on the role of the provisional government, and they're representing like the official authority of the state. And then the other player is the Petrograd Soviet, basically an elected council of workers organized by socialist activists. And you have a game board that's a map mainly with 6 different regions that all have different colors. And it's one of those games where you're trying to have more strength in different areas when they score. It is a card-driven game, and each round you're going to draw 5 cards, these command cards, and both players are then going to like look at their hand of cards, and they're going to pick one card to play secretly face down as a secret objective. And it's basically the card you pick is saying, hey, I want the purple region to score this round. And maybe you place a card and you're like, I'm going to try to get the green region to score this time. And then we basically take 4 turns each during the action phase where you'll be playing a card. When you play a card, the first thing you're going to do is advance the date. So there's a calendar in this game at the top of the board, and every card you play has a certain amount of days on it, and you're going to just move this marker forward to say time is advancing on this calendar. As you pass certain marks on the calendar, you might get some bonus actions, and then something happens as the calendar flips to a different month. It kind of pushes the game timer along as you move through months, and different things happen when we hit certain months in the game. But yeah, so you're going to play a card, and cards will have, besides the amount of days it moves the calendar, cards have 2 different action options on them. One is usually a way for you to recruit units into a certain region. So maybe I could recruit 3 strength worth of units into the brown zone. And that could be, I could put 1 single 3 strength token out, or I could put a 2 and a 1. So you can kind of split it however you want. And these unit tokens are double-sided, so they have their refresh side, and then on the other side, they have like an exhausted side. The other actions you can kind of do are moving. So once you have units on the board, you can move them. Although there is a blockade token that gets shifted around as the game goes on, and it kind of prevents you from moving from one region to another, and it kind of shifts where it can go, which adds a little interesting dynamic and makes it hard to travel to certain regions. But yeah, you can recruit units, you can move units, and then you can refresh them. That's the main thing you're doing with your cards, but it is a card-driven game. So between that and the calendar, like depending on how much you maybe want to move the calendar forward or not, that's going to give you some tough choices with your hand of cards. And then after both players have played 4 turns where you play a card and resolve it, then you're going to do a scoring phase. And there's always a region that's publicly known that like, hey, maybe the white region is our unrest region. So we know at the beginning of the round, we are definitely going to be scoring in white. But then the other places we put the other 2 places are the places we put our secret objective cards on. Those are also going to score. So while you're playing the game and moving units around, you're trying not to be super obvious about which secret objective card you put down, because then, your opponent is probably going to be like, well, I'm going to put more units there. So you're kind of like trying to throw each other off a little bit. But you pretty much total up the strength of the units in the region you're scoring, and whoever has the higher strength is going to win a certain amount of points. On the objective cards, I think it tells you the amount of points you win, and they kind of vary a little bit. And then I think for the unrest region, it kind of depends on which month it is. I think it increases as the game goes on, if I recall. But the other thing is there are these neutral tokens out on the board, and one player is always going to be in control of the neutral tokens, and that is driven by a wooden piece called the Will of the People that gets passed between the two players. And one of the ways the Will of the People shifts is when the calendar advances to a next month. If you are the person that triggers the calendar moving to the next month, you get the Will of the People. So there's also like a timing of taking control of the Will of the People, because now all of a sudden, when you're scoring up regions, you're adding those neutral units and your own as you're totaling them up. And I should also mention the scoring system is kind of like a Twilight Struggle, like push and pull. Like there's one track with 0 in the center and it starts at 0. As you get points, it pushes towards you. As I get points, it pushes back towards me. So the object of the game is to have it on your side at the end of the game, or the game could end early if you're able to push it all the way to the end of the track. But yeah, this game is just, I really like it. I think, I love card-driven games, number one, because of, again, the hand management decisions are really awesome. And I think this one is unique. I didn't even mention you have leaders that have special abilities that are really powerful, kind of like one-time use abilities. And then you also like that whole having 2 different actions on all of your cards, and also managing the calendar, like moving the date. Like, hey, if I move the calendar this much, that means that Cole on his turn can move it here and he's going to get a bonus action. Maybe I want to play this card, even though I don't care about putting units in that area, but I really want to like kind of push to get that, to push the calendar to the next month so I can get the Will of the People before we score or something. So there's like this other thing that's going on in your head as you're manipulating the calendar, which I've never really seen that kind of mechanism in a game, I don't think. It's also like really easy to teach. It plays in less than an hour, and the art and graphic design are really awesome. And the components too. And the art is Kwanchai Moria, and then the graphic design is Luis Francisco. And it's just kind of a banger that not many people know about. And I like you, I love historical games too, so yeah. So yeah.
Well, and it seems like it's in that genre of like, I feel like one of the best worlds, one of the best corners of design right now is the hour-long history game, like Siege of Vienna,
Watergate,
which just came out, or not what is that called, Fire and Stone, and Watergate, and all. I feel like these are like the fruit of like Twilight Struggle doing so well for so long is like now we're getting these amazing hour-long historical games like Red Flag over Paris. That is, it's so good. I've been wanting to play this game for a long time. We have a copy in the office, but I just never cracked it, and so now it's tough to play.
It is really great. And I think out of a lot of those games, it might be my favorite. I don't know. It's hard to say. They all have something like really special about them. But yeah, I love these games. Siege of Vienna is like a little bit like more like an hour and a half, but still, it's like they're very accessible and pretty easy to teach and learn. And yeah, it's really awesome. So that is Dual Powers Revolution 1917. What's your number 3?
All right, so my next one is the most divisive game on my list. So every game that I've listed is like a game that I feel like I could pull out, and everyone's gonna have a great time. And this is one where I've seen people refuse to play a second game. I've seen people get mad. I think it's actually brilliant. And this is Haig and Ricky Tata's Senators from 2017. Oh. You might know Ricky's work from Coup.
Oh, yeah.
He designed Coup, and he has a little studio called Lamame, I guess. So they usually will do like very small print runs during Essen, and then they get licensed abroad. So you can find Senators from Indie Board and Card right now. It's very easy to get a copy of. So this is probably the easiest game to get that I listed. Now, here's the thing about Senators. Senators is one of the meanest auction games ever conceived. And the core mechanism of the game is that when you buy something, you don't really own it. And someone can just buy it, come and say, we're going to auction that again. Um, there are various things that you can do to like hold the things that you own a little bit better, and you're building these these kind of like little political parties, and it's really all about the evaluation of these different political gifts that you might be getting. And then the thing that makes people crazy when they play the game is there is a very small but very impactful event deck. And the event deck will say things like, you lose all your money. I mean, it's like stuff like that. And so the way that I teach the game though is I say like, here are the event cards. You need to know, this isn't the kind of game where you say like, and then we're going to draw an event card and we'll figure it out. I'm like, no. Before I teach you a single rule of this game, we're going to go through all the event cards, because you need to know what are the kinds of things that can happen. And once that opens up, the game is so dynamic. The interesting kind of like moves that you can make and how you evaluate things is fascinating. The different like points of leverage. I think it is. Ooh. I think it's brilliant. It's a lovely game in a small box. And if you like auction games that can be quite mean, I put this one up there with like the Estates.
Ooh.
So if you really like the Estates, but you want something like a little noisier and crazier, Senators 2017 by Tata is just great, and it's very easy to get. Indie Board and Card did a pretty good job on a reprint of it. It's very easy to find, and it is a lovely game that is mean as hell.
I know I've seen this box cover, and I probably almost picked it up at some point, but now, yeah, I will definitely pick it up, because I am somebody who loves stuff like rough. The Estates. Okay, my next game, I have actually only played one time, but it made such an impact on me, and it's like one of those games that I've been wanting to play so much ever since. And I think the only reason I haven't is because I keep saying I'm going to play it with the same people that I played it with the first time, and we never can really align. But anyways, my number 3 is Three Kingdoms Redux. And it is a game designed by Yao Kang Leong and Christina Ning Zhen Wei. And I think I got those names okay. And it's published by Starting Player, and then Capstone did like a reprint of it at some point, and it was originally released in 2014. And it is a 3-player game. So already off the bat, it's a 3-player game, which is very rare, and it's so well done. So the premise is the Han Dynasty has fallen, and basically the 3 major powers, the Wei, Wu, and Shu, are vying for control, and each player is controlling, the lords from one of those factions, and they're trying to take control and unify China under their own rule. Basically, that translates to you need to have the most victory points at the end of the game. And a game could play in up to 12 rounds, but there are a couple ways the game could end early, which is another thing that's interesting. I love me some, different victory objectives and conditions. But players start off asymmetrically, reflecting history. So basically, whoever's the Wei is going to have a lot of like manpower advantages. You start with more generals, but you have less resources. And over time, you're going to grow weaker. Whereas the Shu start a lot weaker, less generals. And generals are what you're going to use for the worker placement aspect of the game. But you have more resources and the power of the people, and the Shu gets stronger as the game progresses. And then the Wu are somewhere kind of in the middle and trying to just kind of maintain and constantly improve. But off the bat, there's some real cool asymmetry with how the game starts with the 3 different factions. So there is the worker placement in this game has a twist, because you are bidding on the different action spaces. So you have these different generals, and each general has a card that comes with it, and it has a little counter, like a token. And generals have an administration stat value, a combat stat value, and a leadership stat value. And then generals also all have a unique ability, which is really cool. So there are certain action spaces that are only going to care about like it's like a combat space, like probably like building an army. You're going to care about what general you're putting's combat stat. But pretty much this is not a worker placement game in that I place a worker on a space and now no one else can, but instead it's more of a bidding system. So I can place one worker on an action, and then later, Cole, you can come in and place one of your generals that has a stronger, administration value than mine. But I can come back later and play another one of mine. And in the end, after we've all placed all our generals, whoever had the highest strength for whatever type of action it is, that person is going to be the one that gets to take the action. So it's like a worker placement kind of bidding system. And, there are all these different actions. So it's not like a game where we're just, going to war. It's not like an area control thing. It's like you have to kind of develop your state's farm and marketplace. You're going to be recruiting armies, producing weapons, trading resources, constructing state enhancements. You're going to be trying to become the emperor, improving your relationship with tribes on the borders, like all sorts of things. There are lots of different ways that you can get victory points, by building armies, becoming the most powerful emperor, developing your farming system, and all that good stuff. So there are lots of different ways you can get points. At the end of the round, you're going to see which player was able to take the most actions, like basically won the bid of the most action spaces. And the other two players in the next round are going to be in an alliance together. And they have one action space where they basically are going to use their combined strength to kind of like give them a little bit of an advantage. But yeah, this game is like so good. It's so good. And I never hear people talking about it, not nearly as much as I think people should be. But like the balance of the three player aspect with the asymmetry is so cool. Like they have a whole system where you can't fight just one of your neighbors. Like, so if you were like doing poorly or something, I can't just keep attacking you. Once I've attacked you, my next attack has to be with the person to my, on my other side. So it has like a lot of really cool balancing elements to it. And then I really, really like that like bidding worker placement system. That was really cool. And then the general's special abilities is really cool. And also, any game that has a lot of different win conditions, like the couple ways this game can end. If one of the player gets all the way up the Emperor track and they become the Emperor, the game ends immediately, they win. If a player is able to get their 5th general at a border location, that's another way you can auto win and end the game. And then also if a player hits level 5 for both their farm and marketplace developments, that's another way the game can end early. So it's like you're constantly like watching other players and where they are with, all these different ways the game can end. And yeah, I find it really fascinating. And again, it's another like historically based game. Not a lot of 3-player games out there. We got Churchill. I could probably name a few others that are great. That'll be a whole nother episode. 3-player games. But yeah, this is just, I don't know. I just found it to be really awesome, and it kind of never left my mind after that first game. So I need to get it back to the table.
It's really good. It's like one of my favorite Capstone Games publications.
Sweet. I'm glad you tried it.
It has the virtue of like a good size of box. It's like a little small,
it's thinner.
but it like there's a lot of game in there.
Yes, totally. I actually opened the box today because I wanted to just like double check a few things because it's been a while since I played it. And I remember how tough it is to fit everything in that box because it's kind of thinner than most boxes. But yeah, I'm glad you played it too. And yeah, I just think it's really cool.
Yeah, it's really neat, and I really the game that they published afterwards, the Chinese Zodiac racing game, is like also a very good racing game.
I don't know that one.
So like I think that same couple made another game called Race for the Chinese Zodiac, something like that, and it's good. It's a good game, and it has like some really lovely little flourishes, and it's also like pretty easy to get a hold of.
Awesome! Oh, well, I'm gonna check that out too. So that was my number 3, 3 Kingdoms Redux. What is your number 2, Cole?
Okay, so my number 2 is it the hardest thing to get of my list? Maybe, but it isn't that hard to get. So this is a game called Bausack or Bandu. It has 2 names. I mean, I think they were worried about publishing something called Bausack in English, so Milton Bradley renamed it Bandu.
Another Milton Bradley.
You can find either one, and this is probably my favorite widely available dexterity game.
Oh.
So if I don't include things that are like big, like a crokinole or a clask or something, this is it's a stacking game. And whenever I play a stacking game, I ask myself, is it better than Bandu? And the answer is almost always like, well, absolutely. And the person who designed it, a guy named Klaus Zock, who's the Zock company, right? Named after him, I believe. And has designed tons and tons and tons of different games, including the Estates. But the core mechanism of this game is basically, and I'll say why it's hard to talk about the core mechanism of the game, is that here you have a stacking game. And in most stacking games, players are rewarded for being very conservative in their stacking. So like you're doing something kind of fun. I actually think For Science is a good exception to this, where like it gets around this problem, but that's a whole other separate chat. But in most stacking games, you always put the pieces in the safest places. And the way Bandu works is the box is filled with odd shapes. And on your turn, you can either basically like place something, or you can bid to not place it.
Gotcha.
And so basically, you're like making these gambits where you're like, I'm only going to place this if you give me a lot of points. And so you end up building these like really like hairy, strange towers where you're like, you all don't think I can do this, but I'm going to do it. And but it's a little hard to talk about the game because there are tons of really good variants. There are variants where like you either place, you either have to spend resources to play it. You can either like auction a piece and say, I don't want to place this, so we're auctioning the right to not place it, or the right to place it. So there's like funny different dynamics in it. But it's one of those. It's a game that I actually think it's really fun to have a game like that, where the first thing that I would encourage players to do is like go to the variants on BGG and like find the version of it that is most exciting to them. But it is just a really lovely dexterity stacking game. And it's one where like I actually have 2 copies of Bandu because I like to just put all the blocks together. We have like a big pot. We spill them out and play a bunch of it. And it's just lovely. And it's from 1987, so it's a little old fashioned. But it's a reminder of like how many good dexterity dynamics were present
back in the day,
a long time ago.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it still plays great. It's a lot of fun, and it's a good nightcap game. It's like one of my favorite ones to be like, yeah, we've had 4 or 5 hours of heavy stuff. Let's end by playing some Bausack.
Awesome. My number 2, I know is Soul: Last Days of a Star.
Oh, I almost put it on my list, and then I was like, I think Candice is probably going to put it on.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to put it on your list. And actually, it was number 1 on my list until maybe like 6 hours ago or so. But I think I had to push my number 1 up. But anyway, I love Soul: Last Days of a Star. I've talked about it on this podcast before, but it is designed by Ryan and Sean Spangler. Published by their publishing company, Elephant Laboratories, and it was originally released in 2017. And there is a reprint on Kickstarter until the end of 2022, maybe just like dipping into the first few days of 2023. And in Soul, it plays with 1 to 5 players, and your goal is kind of to transmit as much energy from the sun back to your own arc so you can escape the solar system before the sun explodes. And it's basically you have this board that represents the solar, like a solar environment with, different layers around the sun. And everybody has their own mothership that's constantly rotating slowly around the outer orbit of the board. I think counterclockwise, if I recall. I think the motherships move counterclockwise. But in this game, you have 3 actions, and you take 1 action on your turn. And, within those actions, there's like a little bit of variation. But you can I can't remember what the first one is called, but it's basically you spawn new ships, or you can move your little sundiver ships. You have these little ships that you're going to be spawning out from one of the spaces adjacent to your mothership. or you can move some of your little sun divers around the board, and you're trying to kind of set them up so that you can take the other two actions. One is the convert action, where you get your sun divers into certain formations, and then you can convert them into either a gate or one of 3 types of stations. And then the other reason you want to move your sun divers is to position them around different stations so that you can then activate the stations and use their abilities. So there are energy nodes where you can activate to get energy cubes. There are, what is the thing where you get more ships? I can't think. Foundries, ship foundries, exactly. And then there are also the other stations where you can basically spend energy to convert it to momentum, which is your victory points. But when you're taking actions in this game, the convert and activate actions, depending on what layer of the board you are in, you're going to draw a certain amount of instability cards. And these instability cards are kind of the timer for the game, but they're also associated with a special ability. So you'll be able to have one of these instability cards on your player board face up that you can trigger at some point to do some cool ability. And this game comes with all of these different abilities that you can mix and match. And it's so cool. The other thing that's really awesome about it is that you can use your opponent's stations, and they might get a little bonus, or you could try to time it to use their buildings so that they can't get the bonus, and then you could take advantage of the bonus. But there's all this really cool, challenging timing and resource management that comes with such a game that's so kind of simple and elegant. And I just love this game. I also love the racing feeling you get as the instability deck. I've had games where those solar flare cards, I didn't mention that. So you have in the instability deck, they're shuffled in 13 solar flare cards, I think. And as you draw them, you're ticking down the timer for when the sun is going to explode. So you never really know exactly when that is going to happen. So there's just this I got to get more momentum before this happens, So anyway, I've gushed about this game, I think on episode 3, and I just continue to love it. It's one of those games that, I play a lot of games, I get a lot of games, and they're not every game that I get do I say, oh, I'm clearing a space on my main shelf for this game. And Soul is one of those games I'm this is just this is a banger. This is a keeper for my collection.
Okay, I will tell you a story. I'll tell everyone a story about Soul,
please.
Which is that BGG Con 2016, I met Ryan and played Soul, and he was walking around with a little sun shirt, and he was like, "Hey, anybody want to play Soul?" And I looked at the board and said, "What's this game like?" And he said, "Cosmic Encounter and Roads and Boats." And I said, "You got me."
Totally.
Yeah, look at you. You caught me. And so I sat down. We had such a good time playing it. I was flipping out. I was like, this is amazing. and I was talking to him about design, and he was like, he's like, wait a second, did you just design Pax Premier? And at this point, the first edition of Pax Premier had just gone to backer, not backers, but the people who pre-ordered it. So there were probably 100 people who had played Pax Premier worldwide. And Ryan had just gotten back from a convention in Portland where he had played a lot of Pax Premier, as it turns out. And he
awesome.
Really liked it. And so we started talking, and I played Soul a bunch. And then at the end of BGCon, I was like, Ryan, if you let me take this prototype with me, I promise to write you a review. Because I was I just didn't want to let it go.
That's
and he did. So I I don't write that many reviews, but one of the few reviews I wrote was a review about Soul.
That's awesome.
Because I desperately wanted to bring it with me. And the thing that I find so remarkable about the game is that it did not change that much from that prototype copy to the final copy. And this game came out, 5 years ago or something? Or 4 maybe. And it's still just as good, just as fresh, just as wonderful. I'm so happy they're reprinting it because it is exceptional. It's a great game, and it is I think that it's always good, and sometimes it's transcendent.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
so I'm so happy to see Soul on the list.
Yes. It had to be. Again, it was almost going to be number one, but for reasons.
All right, well now I'm very excited for you.
So that was Soul: Last Days of a Star. All right, it's
Okay,
number
so
one time.
Here it is, drum roll, etc. My number one is, so I have like a little bit of a, I have what do you call this? Like a bugbear or like a thing that bothers me. That a lot of times when I encounter folks who play games, we treat Catan like year zero. Like that's when games started.
Gotcha.
And so a lot of the games I've chosen today have been games that came out before Catan on purpose, because I like to remind folks that like there was like, we have like 50 years of like brilliant, wonderful modern game design kind of before Catan. And so the game I chose is a game called Hoity Toity. By 1990 by Klaus Tuber. Little known designer, didn't really do anything else except, of course, Catan. And this is the game he won the Spiel for. He won his first Spiel for this game. It's had a lot of different names. There's like an Avalon Hill version called by Crook or by Hook or something. I'm not going to embarrass myself by pronouncing the original German title, but Hoity Toity, I believe, is the most easy to get copy in English, and you can find it from Uberplay, and there's lots of different versions. I love my Avalon Hill version.
Cool.
This game is awesome. It is so unlike anything that has ever happened since there is no game like it. The basic formula is quite simple. You are kind of like rich art collectors, and every turn we're going to like go to these fancy houses and we're going to show off our art collections, and whoever has the best art collection, they're going to get the prize. And you judge your art collections by like type and also by scale. So you're looking like, oh, I've got like a modern vase and a very old vase, and you kind of like put them in a row, and there's some like little set collection rules that you have to do. But the thing that twists it is when you get to the new site where you're about to exhibit your art collection, you can decide to maybe steal, be a thief. And so there's like a funny rock, paper, scissors mechanism where you're like, I'm not going to display, I'm going to like be the little thief. But if someone else picks the cop, they'll catch you. So you're playing this like little rock, paper, scissors game.
Oh, interesting.
And what it does, I mean, I think that, in game design, the kind of like single blind bid, Prisoner's Dilemma style games, it's like one of the most fertile places in game theory to like operate. But a lot of board games don't use it because it can feel random. It's like actually kind of hard to structure a really good game around that mechanism, which is very different from a video game. I mean, a lot of video games are built around essentially rock, paper, scissors style mechanisms, but this is a good example of how to do it right, which is instead of there being like one bid, there are a lot throughout the game. And you might say like, boy, I haven't been a thief for a while, and like I need to pick up some things, or I need to like get ahead one way or another. And then other players are like, wow, Cole's looking really suspicious over there. I'm gonna pull the cop. But it is so wonderful. And it's one of those games that whenever I like lay it out on the table, people are like, what is this old weird looking game? What weird thing have you pulled out of your bag? And then within like 2 turns, they're hooked. They're completely hooked. And it plays beautifully. It has so much room for like clever play and like gotchas. And it is the rare, I think it's a really rare type of game that it's a take that type of game, but it never feels arbitrary.
Gotcha. Cool.
Like it's a take that where you're like, I'm not doing it just because I happen to like have pulled a card that's going to make me do it easy. It's like, no, we're playing a mind game here. And it to me, I find this game such a tonic, because I think we're in a state right now where a lot of the big Euro games that come out, and certainly some of the stuff I work on, it's very complicated, very articulated game systems. And playing Hoity Toity, it's almost like a joke. It's like a joke that is 30 years or 40, I guess 30 years ahead of its time, where it's almost like, imagine you're playing a game of On Mars and someone's like, aha, but I'm playing the scary robot and I'm taking all your little pieces. And it just so gets out. Like, I feel like it's a tonic to our own design moment. And so whenever I'm feeling like, do I even like games anymore. Like whenever I'm in like a weird funk where I'm like, what sort of games are really exciting me? I'll play Hoity Toity and be like, oh, games are about play, very, very fundamentally. I always tell people that like I'm not really interested in like questions around fun because it's so bound up in taste. I don't know what fun is, but I am really interested in play. And Hoity Toity is so playful. And I think it is worth scaring up a copy on you.
Okay. I've definitely heard of Hoity Toity, but I don't think I had ever heard like what it was all about. But that's all.
I will say, I think it's better than Catan, and Catan is amazing.
Okay, cool. So. Yeah, and I love this perspective you're bringing to this topic too, because you've been playing some, like, I didn't know what these games, like, I grew up in a household playing like Uno, Sorry, Trouble, Hungry Hippo, like sure. I did play Stratego growing up, and I always remembered like loving that in my childhood. So, but I missed out on a lot of this, like these years of different games like Hoity Toity. Okay. All right. Another one for my list.
All right. What's your number one?
My number one is Star Wars, the card game. So Star Wars, it is an LCG, living card game. I guess the original core game was designed by Eric Lang, and it's Fantasy Flight Games. And I'm sure, it has a million expansions that were probably designed by other people. So credit to those, but I just don't know all their names. But this came out in 2012, and I feel like I got into it maybe like 2 years ago, and I had heard nobody, like I know, people play Netrunner, Arkham Horror, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones. I hear about all these games, and I never hear people talking about Star Wars, the card game. And I don't remember exactly when it fell into my radar. It might have been Joel from Drive-Thru Games had a video that I just happened to watch. But this is a 2-player card game where one player is commanding the rebels. You're on the light side. The other player's controlling the Empire on the dark side. And you get a deck of objective cards. And I think it's like 10. You play a game with 10 different objective cards. And each objective card has like 5 player deck cards associated with it. So in terms of like, you're not doing any crazy deck construction and struggling, and what cards do I want to put in my deck to make this good? No, you just pick some objective cards, and then you add the cards that go with that objective card into your deck to make your deck, which is, I think that's kind of neat. And, because I'm still intimidated by figuring out how to construct decks in Arkham Horror, the card game, and Lord of the Rings, and all sorts of things like that, because I just feel like I'm still not at a skill level where I can do it well. But this game, again, you pick objective cards, and then you just pick the other player cards that are associated with those objective cards. So you'll have a deck, and you'll have your objective deck. And at the beginning of the game, you draw 6 cards from your main deck, and then you're going to draw 4 objective cards, and you're going to pick 3 of them face down and put them face down, and your opponent's going to do the same. And a lot of the game, so this is another like asymmetrical victory condition game where the Empire, if you're on the dark side, your goal is to make sure the Death Star dial hits 12. And that's also like a timer for the game. So when the Death Star dial hits 12, Empire player wins. The Rebel player is trying to destroy 3 of the Empire's objective cards. You have to add damage to them. Once they have a certain amount of damage, they're destroyed. So I think they have to destroy 3 of them, if I recall. So a lot of what you're doing in this game is you're playing cards into your tableau, like different characters from Star Wars. There might be some like event cards too. And then you're battling each other. So then there's a conflict phase where, I think similar to other card games I've talked about, like one person's kind of on the offense and the others on the defense. But the cool thing with combat is before you start fighting and resolving the conflict, you have to bid for initiative. And the way this game handles it is there is an edge battle that happens before you start actually resolving the combat. And there's a whole like bluffing element with this because you have your hand of cards, your opponent has their hand of cards, And you start, I think whoever, the main active player will put a card face down if they want to commit a card to the edge battle. And then you have the choice of putting a card face down. And there's like a back and forth until we both pass. But this is where, when we reveal these cards, on the left side of every card, there are a certain amount of like pips going down the left side. And whoever has the highest value is going to get the initiative for the battle, which is super important because you're hitting first. You might be able to like kill somebody before they get to attack back. And also on all of your attack cards, well, I don't know if it's all of them, but most of them have like, here are some icons for the type of attack I'm doing. You'll also have some white icons. And only if you are the player who won the edge battle can you also use those. So you get like your cards are a little more powerful. But when you're deciding which cards to put in for the edge battle, you could be putting like low number cards, but put like lots of cards. And, I could be making you sweat on the other side, and you might dump something, and I might not even care about having the initiative for this kind of battle. So there's this whole like mind game going on, which is awesome. Then you resolve the battle, and whenever you use a card to attack or defend, you put a little focus token on it, and that means it's used. At the end of the round, there's also, I forget what the phase is called, something like you're dealing with the Force. You can commit characters to the Force. So each side, you have these 3 cards that you can tuck underneath one of your characters, and you could say, I'm committing like Yoda to the Force. And now that Yoda's committed to the Force, that's going to help me. There's another like little Force battle that's going on between us, because I forget who starts with it, but I think the Rebel side starts with it, but you have this token at the beginning of the game that if you have the Force, you're going to get some advantage. If the dark side takes it from you, they're going to get an advantage, but it only triggers when you're the active player and you have the more Force value kind of thing. So if you're the Empire and you have the Forces on your side, meaning you've committed more strength to the Force, you're going to advance the Death Star dial 2 clicks when it's at the start of the round instead of 1. So that's like, that's your victory condition. So that's moving. But if the Rebel player has it, they get to like do a damage to you. So there's a whole thing of managing resource, or like the people you're committing to the Force, because then if you ever want to use them in battle, once they're committed to the Force, you have to put 2 exhaustion tokens on them, or focus tokens. And each round, you're only removing 1 per character. So it's like you're kind of jamming that person up in terms of using them for battle. So anyway, this game has like so many like interesting layers to it. I went out and I bought like, I think I bought one or 2 copies of the core set, and then I bought like a bunch of expansions. I barely scratched the surface. I always joke with my friends that like I get into living card games when they're kind of dead, because I'm like,
sure, that's a good time.
Yeah, I'm late to the party, but I just think this is a game that like you could probably still get, look secondhand eBay on BGG market, but it's so fun, especially if you're a Star Wars fan. Like, this is awesome. And if you just like games with awesome hand management, oh my goodness, it is like so good.
Yeah, that sounds like a blast.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a sucker for Star Wars.
Oh yeah, you will love it.
I'll hang with it.
Cool. So that was the Star Wars the card game. But yeah, Cole, thank you so much for joining me today. I mean, like I said, you were the perfect person to have to come on to talk about board game hidden gems. So I did not know anything about like any of the games you mentioned, and I'm like they're on my radar, and I'm really excited to try them.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is the kind of curatorial stuff that I just love to death. I love to death. At the office at Leader Games, we used to do a thing on Fridays where I would drum up some game and make everyone play it, because I'm like, you can't work at a game company and not have played like Stephen Dorr's Intrigue or something. And they'd always be like a weird offbeat title. So I really appreciate coming on. And I want you to know, and everybody listening to know, that it was so hard to make this list. There were tons of games I wanted to put on. I thought, okay, only five. I
know. It is really tough. And I'm sure, I almost feel like you should make a list somewhere and put it out with all of your hidden gems, because I'm sure tons of people, including myself, would be so curious to hear that list. But yeah, thanks again, Cole, and great chatting with you as always, and we'll have to do it again soon.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me on, Candice.
You've been listening to the Board Game Geek podcast, produced and edited by Candice Harris. Special thanks to Matt Fonda for editing and mixing our music. Be sure to visit us on the web at BoardGameGeek.com. You can also find us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitch under Board Game Geek. You can reach us by email at podcast@BoardGameGeek.com. Thanks for listening, and happy gaming!